Mom, I quit my job. Now you pay the mortgage and my wife's loan all by yourself. The fork was halfway to my mouth when my son said it. Just like that. Calm. Cold. The way you tell someone the weather outside. No warning. No apology. Not even the decency to look me in the eyes when he said it. Mom, I quit my job. So now you're going to have to cover the mortgage, the car loan, and Delilah's credit cards. All of it. By yourself. I set my fork down on the table so slowly, so carefully, like if I moved too fast, something inside me would shatter and never go back together again. 62 years I had lived on this earth. 62 years of working, praying, bleeding quietly so that the people I loved never had to bleed at all. And this is where it had brought me. To this table. To this moment. To these words hanging in the air between us like smoke from something already burned to the ground. His wife, Delilah, didn't even look up from her phone. She just smiled at the screen. Like she already knew. Like this had been decided long before lunch. I looked at my son, my Ezekiel, the boy I had pushed into the world with everything I had. The boy whose fever I had broken at 3 in the morning with cold towels and prayer. The boy whose father's face I saw every time he laughed. And I felt something shift inside me. Something quiet. Something permanent. And what I did next, nobody saw coming. Not Ezekiel. Not Delilah. Not even me. But before I tell you what I did, I need you to understand how we got here. Because this story didn't start at that lunch table. It started the way all slow disasters start. Quietly, lovingly, with the best of intentions. And by the time you hear everything, you will not believe what this 62-year-old woman did to protect everything she had left. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments right now. And if this story already has your heart beating a little faster, stay with me, because we are just getting started. My name is Martha. Martha Abigail Osei-Mensah. And I have lived in my house at 14 Cypress Lane for 31 years. My late husband, Solomon, built this house with his own 2 hands and a bank loan that took us 11 years to pay off. He was a carpenter by trade and a dreamer by nature. He used to say that a man's house is not his castle, it's his prayer. Something he builds and leaves behind as proof that he was here. That he loved. That he tried. Solomon died of a heart attack 7 years ago, right in the middle of the backyard garden he had planted for me. He was trimming the rose bushes when it happened. They found him on his knees in the soil, like he had just decided to pray and never got back up. The doctors said it was fast. I choose to believe it didn't hurt. I have to believe that, because the alternative is something I cannot carry. After Solomon died, it was just me in this house. 4,300 square feet of memories. His tools still hanging in the basement. His reading glasses still on the nightstand. His smell slowly fading from the pillows no matter how many times I refused to wash the cases. I had my pension from 30 years of working as a seamstress and alterations specialist at Celestine's Bridal on Harmon Street. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. $1,800 a month, steady as a heartbeat. The house was paid off. I had no debt, just a quiet life, a small garden, and the echo of a man I would love until the day I stopped breathing. Then Ezekiel called. He was my only child. He and Delilah had been married 3 years, renting an apartment on the east side of the city that cost them $1,400 a month. Ezekiel worked as a logistics coordinator at a freight company. Delilah worked, or rather, Delilah had worked, as a receptionist at a dental office until she decided, 6 months into their marriage, that working did not agree with her lifestyle. I didn't say anything then. I told myself it was their business. But the call came on a Tuesday evening in March, and Ezekiel's voice had that careful, practiced tone that told me he had rehearsed what he was about to say. "Mom, Delilah and I have been struggling," he said. "The rent is killing us. I was thinking, and I know this is a big ask, but what if we moved in with you? Just for a while. Until we get back on our feet. Just for a while." I have learned in 62 years of living that those are the 4 most dangerous words in the human language. But he was my son, my Ezekiel, Solomon's boy, and the house had 4 bedrooms and only 1 heartbeat rattling around inside it. So I said yes. Of course I said yes. They moved in on a Saturday in April with 17 boxes, 2 suitcases, a flat-screen television bigger than my dining room window, and an attitude from Delilah that I should have paid more attention to. She walked through my house that first day with her eyes moving over everything like she was taking inventory. Touching the curtains. Pausing at the kitchen. Standing in the living room with her hands on her hips. Looking up at the ceiling the way a person looks at something they're already planning to change. "It's cozy," she said and smiled at me. I smiled back. "Lord forgive me," I smiled back. The first month was fine. Ezekiel helped with groceries occasionally. Delilah cooked twice, I think, in the first 30 days. They kept to themselves mostly. I told myself this was going to work. I told myself Solomon would have wanted me to help our son. I told myself a lot of things in those early weeks that I would later have to unlearn. By the second month, something had quietly shifted. The grocery trips I was making got bigger and more expensive. Delilah had tastes, specific, non-negotiable tastes. Imported olive oil. A particular brand of orange juice that cost $6 a carton. Salmon, not tilapia. Name brand everything. I didn't say a word. I adjusted my budget. I told myself it was fine. The electricity bill came in, and it was $90 higher than any bill I'd seen in 3 years. Delilah liked the air conditioning at 68 degrees, day and night, even in spring when the breeze outside was perfect and free. I didn't say a word. I paid the bill. Ezekiel stopped mentioning contributing to the household somewhere around week 6. I noticed, but I waited. I thought maybe he was embarrassed. I thought maybe he just needed time to settle. I gave him time. I gave him grace. I gave him everything I had always given him, because that is what mothers do, and I did not yet understand that this particular child had learned to eat grace like it was bread and never once think about where it came from. By month 4, Delilah had redecorated the guest bathroom. She hadn't asked me. I came home from Celestine's bridal one evening to find the blue towels Solomon and I had bought on our 25th anniversary replaced with beige ones from a department store. The little wooden cross Solomon had hung above the toilet gone. A scented candle and a small succulent in its place. I stood in that bathroom doorway for a long time. Then I went to my room, closed the door, and prayed until I stopped shaking. I still didn't say anything. I told myself it was just a bathroom. I told myself what Solomon always said. Pick your battles, Martha. Not everything deserves a war. But it wasn't a bathroom. That's what I didn't understand yet. It was a test. And I had passed it in the wrong direction. Because people like Delilah, and Lord, I say this with the full weight of what I learned, people like Delilah don't stop when they find a door open. They walk through it and start looking for the next one. By month 6, I started noticing things with my bank account that I couldn't explain. I am not a careless woman. Solomon raised me out of debt, and I have kept myself out of it every day since. I checked my bank statements the way some women check their mirrors, regularly and without flinching. So when I saw a charge for $340 at a furniture store I had never walked into, I noticed. When I saw a charge for $180 at a beauty supply retailer the following week, I noticed that too. I called the bank. They told me the purchases had been made with my debit card, the one I kept in my purse in the kitchen drawer when I was home sewing. The purse I left on the counter every morning while I worked in the back garden. The purse that Delilah walked past every single day. I didn't go to the bank. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I told myself I must be wrong. I told myself there must be an explanation. I switched my card and put the new one in the zippered inside pocket of my winter coat in the back of my closet, and I said nothing. I watched. I waited. And then came the afternoon that changed everything. It was a Thursday in October. The air had that particular smell of autumn in it, dry leaves and distant rain. I was in the backyard, sitting in Solomon's old wooden chair under the elm tree he had planted the year Ezekiel was born. I had my sewing in my lap. A bridesmaid dress for a client, pale gold with hand-stitched beading along the hem. My fingers were moving, but my mind was quiet. Peaceful, even. The kitchen window was open above me. I hadn't thought about that. Neither had they. I heard Delilah first. Told you, Ezekiel, we've been sitting on this too long. This house is worth at least $700,000. We could list it quiet, no agents, just that man Tobias knows from the property firm, and we walk with $300 easy. Cash. I stopped sewing. $300. Ezekiel said. I could hear ice clinking in a glass. Casual. The voice of a man having a conversation he'd had before. That's leaving 400 on the table. We don't need 400. We need fast, Delilah said. 300 cash, no paper trail, and we are on a plane to Las Vegas by New Year's. Gone. A new start. Sun money, no more of this gray little city. And my mother? Ezekiel said. There was a pause. I pressed my hand flat against the half-finished dress in my lap. The beading pressed into my palm. She's 62, Delilah said. She'll figure something out. She can go to your Aunt Miriam's. Or there are programs. Senior housing. She doesn't need a $700,000 house all to herself anyway. Ezekiel said nothing. That was the part that broke something in me that I am not sure has finished breaking even now. He said nothing. He did not defend me. He did not push back. He let his wife talk about disposing of his mother, disposing of me, Martha Abigail Osei-Mensah, who had stitched and prayed and bled for him for 34 years. And he sat there with his ice clinking in his glass like it was just another Thursday. I sat in that chair under Solomon's elm tree, and I did not move for a very long time. The gold dress lay still in my lap. The beading caught the last light of the afternoon and threw tiny sparks across the grass. And in the silence between their voices, I heard Solomon. Not with my ears. With whatever part of a wife keeps her husband alive inside her long after the ground has taken him. I heard him the way I always hear him when I am about to make a decision that matters. Martha, he said, don't you cry. Plan. So I planned. That night, after they had eaten the dinner I cooked and retreated upstairs to watch television on their enormous screen, I went down to the basement. Solomon's basement. The place where he had kept 40 years of carpenter's life. Hand planes and chisels hanging on pegboards, sawdust permanently worked into the concrete floor. The smell of linseed oil and cedar that still lived in every crack. I had not changed a single thing down there. Not one chisel moved. Not one shelf cleared. It was the one room in this house that Delilah had not yet touched, because it was dark and dusty and held nothing she wanted. But it held something now. I moved 3 crates of Solomon's old wood stain from against the far wall. Behind them, built into the stone foundation by Solomon's own hands, was a small locked compartment about the size of a shoebox. He had built it when Ezekiel was a teenager, after a break-in 2 streets over. He kept important papers in it. Original mortgage documents. Insurance policies. Our passports. The house deed. I opened it with the small brass key I kept on the same ring as Solomon's wedding band. The house deed was there, exactly where he had left it. I held it in both hands in the dim light of the basement and read my own name. Martha Abigail Osei-Mensah. Sole owner. Every word a stone wall between me and what they were planning. I placed the deed back inside, added both our bank books, my pension card, and every other document in the house that mattered. Then I locked it. Then I moved Solomon's crates back against the wall. Then I picked up an old paint can and moved it in front of the crates, just for measure. Then I went upstairs and made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table and thought until midnight. By the time I went to bed, I had a plan so clean and so complete that I almost smiled. Almost. The next morning, I made breakfast like I always did. Eggs and toast and tea. I set 3 places at the table like I always did. I waited until they were both seated, Delilah scrolling her phone, Ezekiel yawning into his mug, and then I said it. Quietly. Simply. The way Solomon used to deliver the most important things. I have some news, I said. I've sold the house. The silence that fell over that kitchen was the loudest thing I had ever heard in my life. Delilah's phone stopped moving. Ezekiel's mug froze halfway to his mouth. I'm sorry, Delilah said. The house, I said again, buttering my toast like we were discussing the weather. I've sold it. The paperwork is being finalized. I'll be moving to Barbados at the end of next month. My friend Claudette has a spare room. I've always loved the sea. Ezekiel put his mug down very carefully. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm talking about my house, I said. Which I have sold. You can't just, Delilah started. It's already done, I said, looking at her for the first time that morning. Looking at her the way you look at someone when every performance is over and all that's left is truth. So you'll both need to make arrangements. I'd say you have about 3 weeks. And that was the moment, right there, with the toast still warm in my hand and the morning light coming through the window that Solomon had framed himself 30 years ago, that the real story began. Because what happened next, I did not fully anticipate. What came through that door in the days that followed was something that would test me in ways I had not yet imagined. And what I found, buried deeper than Solomon's compartment, deeper than the basement, deeper than anything I thought I knew about my own son, would leave you absolutely breathless. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth. The moment those words left my mouth, something changed in that kitchen. The air itself changed. It got heavier, thicker, the way it does right before a thunderstorm rolls in, and the birds go quiet, and everything living seems to hold its breath. Delilah was the first one to recover. She always was the faster one. Ezekiel got his emotions from Solomon, slow to boil, deep when they finally did. But Delilah was a different kind of creature entirely. She could flip from smiling to calculating in the time it took you to blink, and I had learned over these months to watch her eyes, not her mouth, because her mouth performed but her eyes planned. She stood up from the table slowly. "You sold this house," she said. "Not a question. A measurement." She was measuring me the way you measure a wall before you knock it down. "Yes," I said, and sipped my tea. "Without telling us." "It's my house," I said. "I don't need permission to sell what belongs to me." She looked at Ezekiel. That look between them, I had seen it before in small doses, little telegrams they sent across rooms. But this one was different. This one was a whole conversation in 2 seconds. Panic wrapped in strategy, wrapped in something that looked briefly, just briefly, like genuine fear. Ezekiel pushed back from the table. He was a tall man, my son. He had Solomon's height and his grandfather Nathaniel's broad shoulders. When he stood up in a small room, you felt it. He had used that physical presence on me before, not violently, never that, but in the way certain people use size, to remind you that they are there, that they are bigger, that they are not going anywhere. "Mom." His voice was low, controlled. "Stop playing games." "I'm not playing anything, Ezekiel," I said calmly. "I'm eating my breakfast. You did not sell this house. The paperwork is being finalized," I repeated, same tone, same steadiness. I had practiced this in the mirror at 5 in the morning. I had practiced it until it didn't shake. He leaned forward and put both hands flat on the table, right there, right in front of me, and looked at me the way I had never, not once in 34 years of raising him, ever seen him look at me before. Like I was an obstacle. Like I was a problem to be solved. "Show me the papers," he said. And I smiled at him. That was the part he didn't expect. I smiled the way old women smile when they have already moved everything worth moving to safe ground, and there is nothing left for the storm to take. "My lawyer has the papers," I said simply. That one sentence did something to Delilah's face that I will carry with me for the rest of my days. Because she had not expected me to say lawyer. She had expected tears. She had expected me to fold the way I had always folded. Quietly, softly, telling myself it was fine, it was love, it was what good mothers do. She had built her entire plan on the foundation of my silence. And I had just pulled one brick out from under it. Ezekiel straightened up. "What lawyer?" he said. "You don't have a lawyer." "I do now," I said. And I picked up my toast and took a bite. The scene that followed was not a conversation. I want you to understand that. It was a performance, and a desperate one, from two people who had just realized that the ground they were standing on was not as solid as they thought. Ezekiel paced the kitchen floor. Delilah got on her phone almost immediately, stepping out of the kitchen to make a call she didn't want me to hear. I stayed at the table. I finished my eggs. I washed my plate in the sink and dried it with the blue dishcloth and put it back in the cupboard. And the whole time my heart was hammering so hard against my chest I was amazed neither of them could hear it. But I did not let them see one tremor. Not one. After 20 minutes, Delilah came back into the kitchen. She had changed tactics. I could see it in the softness she had arranged on her face, the way she sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table like a woman in a church meeting. "Martha," she said gently. She never called me Martha. It was always Mom, or more recently, nothing at all. I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. We all said things over the past few months. We've all been under a lot of stress, and I think maybe this has been more difficult for you than you've let on. She paused. "Ezekiel and I have been talking about getting you some help. Some support. You shouldn't be carrying all this alone." I looked at her. "What kind of help?" I asked. "Just someone to talk to," she said, keeping her voice smooth as cream. "A doctor, maybe. Someone who can check in on you. Because Martha, selling the house suddenly, not telling us, acting like everything is normal, that worries us. It really worries us." There it was. She was suggesting I was not in my right mind. She was planting a seed, careful and small. That Martha, at 62, had perhaps become confused. Erratic. Unpredictable. the kind of woman who needed managing. And I understood, in that moment with that woman's eyes watching me from across Solomon's kitchen table, that this was not a new idea. This was a plan, and it was already in motion. I set down my teacup and looked at Delilah with every ounce of clarity and calm I possessed. I am not confused, I said. I am not sick. I am not in need of a doctor. What I am is the legal owner of this property, which I have chosen to sell. And what I need from both of you is a timeline for when you will be removing your belongings. Her mask slipped, just for a second. One small second where I saw what lived underneath the carefully arranged concern. It wasn't worry. It wasn't love. It was fury. Cold, white-hot, calculating fury. Then it was gone again. Back behind the smile. Of course, she said softly. Of course, Martha. We'll figure it out. I excused myself and went to the backyard. I sat in Solomon's chair and I let myself shake, finally, where no one could see me. My hands trembled in my lap. My chest hurt with the effort of having held myself so completely still while my insides were a river running fast over broken rocks. Solomon, I whispered to the elm tree, to the rose bushes, to the air that still sometimes felt like it remembered him. I hope I am doing the right thing. The leaves moved. Maybe it was wind. I chose to believe it was him. What I had not fully considered was how quickly Ezekiel would move when he felt cornered. I had known my son for 34 years. I had watched him throw tantrums as a toddler, sulk as a teenager, charm his way through his 20s. But I had never seen him frightened. Not genuinely deeply frightened. And a frightened man who has been living on someone else's foundation does not sit quietly and wait for the ground to disappear. He scrambles. He grasps. He calls people. By the second evening, I knew he had made calls. I could feel it in the house. Delilah was quiet in a way that was louder than screaming, that concentrated, productive silence of a woman arranging things. Ezekiel spent 2 hours on the phone in the backyard, pacing the same strip of grass back and forth, his voice too low for me to catch words, but his body language saying everything. On the third morning, I woke up to find a car parked in front of my house that I did not recognize. A silver sedan. Clean. Official-looking. And sitting at my kitchen table when I came downstairs, somehow having been let in by Delilah, was a man I had never seen before in my life. He was perhaps 50, heavy-set, in a blazer that was slightly too small across the shoulders. He had a folder open on my table and a business card sitting at my place setting like I was expected. "Mrs. Osei-Mensah," he said, standing. "My name is Gerald Fox. I'm a property consultant. Your son reached out to me because he mentioned there may be some estate planning confusion regarding this property, and I wanted to come in. How did you get into my house?" I said. He blinked. "Your daughter-in-law let me in." I turned to look at Delilah, who was leaning against the kitchen counter with her arms folded and the particular expression of someone who has been waiting for a plan to begin. "Mr. Fox," I said, turning back to him with a steadiness that came from somewhere I still don't fully understand. "This is my house. I did not invite you here. I do not have estate planning confusion. And I would like you to take your folder and your business card and leave my property immediately." The man looked at Delilah. Delilah looked at the man. A look that told me they had prepared for resistance, but not quite this kind. "Mrs. Osei-Mensah, I just want to help clarify." "I am very clear," I said, and I picked up my phone from the counter and held it where he could see it. "And if you are not walking toward that door in the next 30 seconds, I will call the police and report an unauthorized person in my home." He left. He practically tripped over himself leaving, grabbing his folder, his blazer bunching at the shoulders as he rushed through the hallway. I heard the front door close. I heard the silver sedan start. I watched through the window until it turned the corner and disappeared. Then I turned to Delilah. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. The kitchen was perfectly quiet except for the refrigerator hum and the distant sound of a lawnmower somewhere down the street. "Delilah," I said, and my voice had gone very, very quiet now. That dangerous kind of quiet that Solomon always said was the voice I used right before I became completely immovable. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer me." She lifted her chin. "Waiting. Did you love my son when you married him?" I asked. "Or did you marry him because of what you thought would one day be his?" The question hit her like a slap. I watched it land. She opened her mouth and then closed it, and for just one moment, one raw, unguarded moment, something genuine moved across her face. Something that might have been shame. Something that might have been old pain with its own complicated history. Then it was gone. That's a terrible thing to say to me, she whispered. I've heard terrible things, I replied, through an open kitchen window. And there it was, out in the open. Between us now like a piece of furniture in the middle of a room. Too big to walk around, too heavy to move. She knew that I knew. I watched the color drain from her face and come rushing back, and watched her decide in real time what her next move was going to be. She walked out of the kitchen without another word. I heard her heels on the stairs. I heard the bedroom door close upstairs. And then I heard voices, hers and Ezekiel's, urgent and low and frightened, the way they sound when a plan is coming apart at the seams. I put the kettle on. I made tea. I sat down at Solomon's table in Solomon's kitchen in the house that still had my name on every piece of paper that mattered. And I waited, because I had lived 62 years, and I had learned that the most powerful thing a woman can do in the middle of a storm is simply refuse to be moved. What I wasn't ready for was the letter. It came on a Friday, 5 days after I had told them about the sale. Official envelope. Return address I didn't immediately recognize. I opened it at the kitchen table while my morning tea steamed beside me, and I read it twice before the words fully assembled themselves into meaning. It was from a legal firm, Hargrove and Associates. The letter stated, in the careful polished language of people who charge by the hour, that they had been retained by Mr. Ezekiel Osei-Mensah regarding a matter of property and dependent welfare, and that they had reason to believe that the owner of 14, Cypress Lane may be making financial decisions that were not in her best long-term interest, and that they were formally requesting a meeting to discuss the possibility of a capacity assessment. Capacity assessment. I had to read those 2 words 3 more times. My own son had hired lawyers to have me declared incapable of making my own decisions. My own son, who had eaten food from my refrigerator for 6 months without once buying a loaf of bread, was paying lawyers to tell a court that his mother's mind was gone. My hands were shaking again. But this time it wasn't grief. It wasn't fear either. It was something older and hotter and more righteous than fear. It was the kind of anger that doesn't make noise. The kind that gets very, very still and starts building something. I put the letter down flat on the table. I smoothed it with my palm. I picked up my phone and I called the one person I knew who could help me, my oldest friend, Rebecca, whose youngest daughter, Naomi, had been a property and family law attorney for 11 years. Rebecca, I said when she answered, I need Naomi's number. Right now. Today. Martha? Rebecca said. What happened? My son, I said, is trying to take everything Solomon left me. There was a silence on the other end of the phone. Then Rebecca, who had known me since we were both 23 and foolish and full of plans, said the thing I needed to hear more than anything else in the world right then. Oh, baby, she said. Then we are going to war. But what I did not know, what none of us knew yet, was that while I was sitting at that kitchen table reading that lawyer's letter, while I was calling Rebecca, while I was making my plans and drawing my quiet lines in the sand, Ezekiel and Delilah were already 3 steps ahead of where I thought they were. And what they had done, what I was about to discover when I walked upstairs to get my reading glasses and found Ezekiel's bedroom door hanging wide open and the room completely, utterly, impossibly empty, would stop my heart for a full 10 seconds. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth. The door was open. That was the first thing that was wrong. Ezekiel never left that door open. In 6 months of living under my roof, he had kept that bedroom door closed the way some people keep secrets. Firmly, deliberately, like whatever was behind it was nobody else's business. So when I reached the top of the stairs and saw it hanging wide open like a mouth mid-scream, my feet stopped moving before my brain told them to. I stood in the hallway. Just stood there. The afternoon light was coming through the landing window and falling in a long gold stripe across the carpet, and everything was so quiet that I could hear the elm tree moving in the backyard below. Then I walked to the doorway and looked inside. Empty. Not messy empty. Not packed in a hurry empty. Gone empty. Deliberate empty. The kind of empty that takes planning. The bed was stripped down to the bare mattress. The closet door was open and every hanger bare. The dresser drawers hung open like little mouths with nothing left to say. Delilah's vanity table, that enormous thing she had brought in and set up by the window, covered in bottles and brushes, and the particular clutter of a woman who spent serious time on her appearance, completely cleared. Not one bottle. Not one brush. Not even a ring mark on the wood where her perfume had sat every single morning for 6 months. They were gone. I walked into the room slowly, The way you walk into a place where something has died. My feet on the bare floorboards made a sound I had never heard in this room before, because there had always been Delilah's thick rug covering them. That rug was gone too. She had taken the rug. She had taken a rug that I was almost certain she had bought with my debit card 8 months ago, before I switched it, and she had rolled it up and taken it, and left me standing on bare wood in a room that smelled like her perfume and nothing else. I sat down on the edge of the stripped mattress. And I just breathed for a moment. In and out. The way Naomi had once told me. Breathe before you react, because reaction without breath is just panic with good intentions. So I breathed. And then I got up. And I went through that room like a woman with a purpose. That was when I found the papers. Not my papers. Not the deed or the pension documents. Those were safely locked in Solomon's basement compartment where they had been for weeks now. These were different papers. Folded in half and pushed to the very back of the top closet shelf, in the corner where the shelf met the wall, in the place you would only find something if you were specifically looking. I stood on my tiptoes and I reached, and I felt them before I saw them. Folded paper. Several sheets. I brought them down and opened them at the window where the light was best. It took me a moment to understand what I was reading, and then it took me another moment to accept it. And even then, even standing in that stripped room with the afternoon light honest and clear on every word, part of me refused to believe that my son, my Ezekiel, Solomon's boy, was capable of this. It was a letter, handwritten, in Ezekiel's handwriting that I had known since he was 7 years old and learning to write his name in big careful letters at the kitchen table. Addressed to someone named Tobias Mensah-Brown. And it outlined, in plain simple language that needed no lawyer to translate, a plan to transfer ownership of 14 Cypress Lane using a forged power of attorney document, in exchange for a cash payment of $280,000, to be split between Ezekiel and a third party whose name had been scratched out in heavy ink, but whose initials at the bottom were DA. Delilah Abina, his wife, my daughter-in-law. They had not just been planning to sell my house out from under me. They had already found the buyer. They had a number. They had a method. And the method was a forged document that would make it look like I had willingly signed over the power to sell my own home to my son. I folded those papers very carefully. I walked to my bedroom. I put them inside my Bible, between the book of Psalms and the book of Proverbs, because Solomon always said that was where you put the things that needed the most protection. Then I picked up my phone and called Naomi. She answered on the second ring. Naomi, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I deserved credit for. They've left the house. And I found something. I need you to come. Right now if you can. Naomi arrived 40 minutes later in a dark blue blazer with a leather briefcase and the focused eyes of a woman who had seen family betrayal enough times that it no longer shocked her, but still, clearly, still made her angry on behalf of the people it happened to. She sat across from me at the kitchen table. I put the folded papers in front of her. She read them without speaking. Her face was still and professional, but I watched her jaw tighten at a certain point, that small muscle just below her ear pulling tight, and I knew she had reached the part about the forged power of attorney. When she finished, she looked up at me. Martha, she said quietly, do you understand what this is? Tell me in plain language, I said. This is evidence of planned fraud, she said. Your son and his wife were attempting to forge legal documents to sell your property without your consent. If they had succeeded, you would have lost this house and had almost no legal recourse because on paper it would have looked voluntary. She paused. This is a criminal matter. This goes beyond civil court. I nodded. I had known that. In my bones I had known it from the moment the words on that paper arranged themselves into meaning. But hearing Naomi say it, young, sharp, certain Naomi who had spent 11 years in courtrooms, made it real in a different way. Made it land in my chest like something physical. What do I do? I asked. First, she said, we document everything. These papers, the bank charges, the timeline of events. Then we go to the police. She looked at me carefully. Martha, I know he's your son. I need to ask you directly. Are you prepared for what reporting this means? I thought about Solomon on his knees in the garden. I thought about 31 years in this house. I thought about that rug she took off my floor. I thought about a silver sedan and a man named Gerald Fox sitting at my table. I thought about the word capacity in a lawyer's letter. I thought about Las Vegas. About $300,000. About my son's handwriting on a letter to a man named Tobias. I am prepared, I said. Naomi nodded once. Then she opened her briefcase and got to work. What happened over the next 72 hours was the kind of thing that in normal life you only hear about happening to other people. Other families. People you shake your head about over the phone with friends, saying, "Lord have mercy, can you imagine?" You never imagine it's coming for you. You never imagine it can walk in wearing your own child's face. The police report was filed the next morning. A detective named Abra, a quiet man with tired eyes and a very thorough manner, took my statement and Naomi's documentation and looked at the handwritten letter with the expression of someone confirming something they had suspected for a while. "Mrs. Osei-Mensah," he said, "we'll need to locate your son and his wife for questioning. Do you have any idea where they may have gone?" "I don't know where they are," I said. And that was the truest, strangest, most hollow sentence I had said in a long time. I did not know where my son was. For 34 years I had always known. I had always been the person he called, the person he came back to. And now I was sitting in a police station telling a tired detective that I genuinely did not know where Ezekiel was, and I had filed a criminal complaint against him. The detective was kind about it. People are kinder than you expect when they can see the particular shape of your pain. I went home and I sat in the backyard in Solomon's chair, and I let the feelings come the way you let rain come. You don't fight it, you just stay as sheltered as you can and wait for it to pass. I cried for my son the way you cry for someone who has died, because in a way he had. The Ezekiel I had raised, the boy I had rocked and nursed and prayed over. That boy had been gone for longer than I realized. What had been living in my house these past 6 months was someone I didn't recognize. Someone I had perhaps helped create by never saying no hard enough, by never letting consequences touch him, by loving him in that particular desperate way you love a child when you're afraid of losing them. I had been so afraid of losing him. And I had lost him anyway. I wiped my face with the hem of my apron. I looked at the rose bushes Solomon had planted. I breathed. Then my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something, call it instinct, call it God, call it Solomon, made me pick up. "Mom." Ezekiel's voice. Low. Careful. Coming from somewhere with traffic noise in the background, somewhere busy, somewhere that was not here. I didn't speak for a moment. "Mom, I know you found the papers," he said. "Delilah told me you came through the room." Still I said nothing. I wanted to hear him. I wanted to hear what version of himself he had decided to bring to this phone call. "I need you to listen to me," he said, and his voice cracked slightly on the last word. "I know what it looks like. I know you went to the police. Naomi called me." "Naomi called you?" I said. "She gave me a chance to come involuntarily," he said. "She said if I cooperate it goes better for me. Mom." And here his voice broke entirely, just split right down the middle the way a piece of wood splits when the grain gives out, and what came through the split was something that sounded real, ragged, and young and terrified. "Mom, I don't want to go to jail. I messed up. I messed up so badly, and I know that, and I am so sorry. I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes. The rose bushes blurred behind my eyelids. Here is what nobody tells you about the moment your child asks for your forgiveness for something unforgivable. They don't tell you that your love for them doesn't go away. They don't tell you that your heart can break for someone and stay broken for them, and still know, with complete clarity, that you cannot save them from themselves. That sometimes loving someone means stepping back and letting the consequences come, because the consequences are the only teacher left. "Ezekiel," I said very quietly. "Where is Delilah?" A pause. We're together. Is she the one who came up with the plan?" I asked. "The letter to Tobias. The power of attorney. Whose idea was that?" Silence on the line. Long, telling silence. "Son," I said, "I need the truth. After everything. I deserve at least the truth." He exhaled. It shook. "It was both of us, Mom," he said finally. "I can't put it all on her. I knew what we were doing. I kept telling myself it would work out. That you'd be fine. That you didn't need a house this big." His voice got very small. "I told myself a lot of things." "I know," I said. "I told myself a lot of things too. For 6 months, Ezekiel. I told myself you were just struggling. I told myself you just needed time. I told myself the boy I raised was still in there somewhere, making different choices because he was scared, not because he was—" I stopped. "Not because he was what?" he whispered. Not because he was someone I didn't know anymore, I said. The silence that followed was the deepest one yet. Deeper than the empty room. Deeper than the bare mattress. Deeper than a letter with scratched-out initials at the bottom. Mom, please don't let them arrest me. Please. I'm begging you. And here is where I will tell you something. Something honest and hard and true. In that moment, sitting in Solomon's chair with the rose bushes in front of me and my dead husband's presence somewhere in the air around me, I felt the pull. That ancient, cellular, impossible pull of a mother toward her child. It nearly lifted me out of the chair. It nearly came out of my mouth as yes, come home. We'll fix this, we'll figure it out. I love you, I forgive you, come home. Nearly. But then I looked at the house behind me. At the kitchen window where she had stood talking about Las Vegas and $300,000 and leaving me to figure something out. At the window where I had been sitting sewing a gold bridesmaid dress while my own son planned to sell the ground from under my feet. And I thought of the words from Proverbs that Solomon used to read to me in the evenings. The one about a man who digs a pit. The one about how the pit finds its way back. Ezekiel, I said softly, I love you. I will love you until the day I leave this earth. But I cannot save you from this. What's coming for you now, you built yourself. Brick by brick. I heard him start to say something. I heard Delilah's voice somewhere behind him, urgent and sharp. I heard traffic. I heard the ordinary sounds of a world that kept moving regardless of the wreckage people made inside it. Turn yourself in, I said. That's the only thing I can do for you now. Turn yourself in and let it begin. I ended the call. I sat there for a long time after. The elm tree moved above me. The rose bushes stood exactly where Solomon had put them, rooted and quiet and surviving, the way things that are properly planted do. But what I did not know, what that phone call had not told me, was that even as Ezekiel's voice was breaking on the line, even as he said the words "I'm so sorry" with what sounded like genuine grief, Delilah was already on another phone, calling Tobias. And Tobias, it turned out, already had a buyer who had already signed. And the signed document they were planning to use to make it all legal had a name on it. My name. A signature that looked exactly like mine. That I had never written in my life. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth. I want you to understand something about forgery. It is not just a crime on paper. It is a violation that lives in your body. When Naomi called me that evening and told me, her voice careful and controlled the way it got when she was managing her own anger on someone else's behalf, that a signed transfer document bearing my name had already been submitted to a property firm downtown, something happened to me that I cannot fully describe. It was like someone had reached inside my chest and moved things around without permission. Like a trespassing of the deepest kind. My name, Martha Abigail Osei-Mensah. The name my mother gave me. The name Solomon took and made his own and gave back to me more beautiful than he found it. The name on the deed of this house. The name on 31 years of memories and mortgage payments and quiet, faithful living. Someone had taken my name and written it on a lie. I sat at the kitchen table, and I held the phone against my ear, and I let Naomi talk, and I stared at the spot on the wall where Solomon had hung a small wooden cross the first week we moved in. It was still there. 31 years, and it had never moved. He had hammered it in himself with 3 careful nails and a level, because Solomon did not hang things crooked. Solomon did not do anything crooked. That was the thing about him that I had loved first and longest, his absolute refusal to be anything less than straight. Martha, Naomi said. Are you hearing me? I'm hearing you, I said. The document was submitted yesterday afternoon, which means they had it prepared before Ezekiel called you. The phone call was a distraction. He was keeping you emotional and occupied while Delilah moved the paperwork. I closed my eyes. They are very good at this, I said quietly. They've been planning this for a long time, Naomi agreed. But Martha, and I need you to hear this clearly, they made a mistake. A significant one. What mistake? I said. The document they submitted uses a notary stamp from a firm on the east side. We've already checked. That notary firm closed 14 months ago. The stamp they used is fraudulent, which means the submission itself is fraudulent, which means we now have documented evidence of forgery submitted to an official property office. She paused. Martha, this isn't just civil fraud anymore. This is criminal fraud with paper evidence filed in a government office. This is federal. Federal. I looked at Solomon's cross on the wall. I thought about the book of Psalms where his letter was tucked inside my Bible upstairs. I thought about a man digging a pit. What do we do now? I asked. We go tonight, Naomi said. Before that document gets processed. We go to the property office first thing in the morning with Detective Abra, and we flag the submission as fraudulent before it moves any further. I've already called him. He's ready. And Ezekiel? I said. And Delilah? A pause. There are warrants being prepared, she said carefully. Martha, I'm sorry. I truly am. Don't be sorry, I said. Just be ready in the morning. I hung up and sat in Solomon's kitchen for a very long time. The refrigerator hummed. The elm tree moved in the night wind outside. The little cross on the wall stayed exactly where it had always been, straight and certain and unmoved. I made myself a cup of tea. I opened my Bible to the Psalms. Ezekiel's letter was still there, folded between the pages. I didn't read it again. I just rested my hand on it for a moment the way you rest your hand on a wound. Not to hurt it. Just to acknowledge it was there. Then I went upstairs and I slept. Deeply, cleanly, the way you sleep when you have finally stopped fighting the truth and decided to simply stand inside it. The property office opened at 8:30 in the morning. We were there at 8:15. Me, Naomi, and Detective Abra with his tired eyes and his thorough manner and a folder of documentation that Naomi had spent the previous night assembling with the focused energy of a woman who took personal offense to injustice. The clerk at the front desk was a young woman named Sandra who had the look of someone who had not yet had enough coffee but was doing her professional best. Naomi placed the documentation in front of her and explained the situation in the precise and careful language of the law, and I watched Sandra's expression move from polite attention to genuine alarm to the particular focused urgency of a person who understands they are holding something serious. She called her supervisor. The supervisor called the registrar. The registrar came out from behind a frosted glass door with the kind of brisk energy that meant he had been briefed on the way. Mrs. Osei-Mensah, he said, extending his hand. I'm Gerald Park. I want to assure you that this submission has not yet been processed. It was flagged in our system this morning as pending verification, which is standard procedure for property transfers of this value. Standard procedure. The very bureaucratic slowness that I had always found frustrating in my life had, on this particular morning, saved my house. I shook Gerald Park's hand with both of mine. Thank you, I said. Thank you for being slow. He blinked. Then he smiled. You're welcome, he said, and I think he meant it. The fraudulent document was flagged, frozen, and placed into evidence within the hour. Detective Abra made calls from the parking lot that I could see through the glass door, but couldn't hear. Naomi sat beside me in the waiting area, making notes in her precise, small handwriting. And I sat with my handbag on my lap, and my back straight, and my heart doing something complicated and rhythmic that wasn't quite calm, but wasn't quite panic either. It was somewhere between. The place you live when you're in the middle of the hardest thing, and the end hasn't come yet. At 10:47, Detective Abra came back inside. They've been located, he said. He looked at me directly when he said it, which I appreciated. He was that kind of man. A motel on the western side of the city. Ezekiel is cooperating. Delilah, he paused. Delilah is less cooperative. Of course she was. Of course. Are they being arrested? I asked. They're being brought in for formal questioning. Given the evidence, charges are expected to follow. He paused again, and I could see him choosing his next words the way you choose your footing on uncertain ground. Mrs. Osei-Mensah, your son has asked if he can see you. Before the formal process begins. He asked me to ask you. He held up a hand. You are absolutely not required to agree. I want to be clear about that. I looked at Naomi. She looked back at me with the carefully neutral expression of a woman who had an opinion and was choosing to let me have mine first. I looked at Solomon's wedding ring on my finger. I had never taken it off. Not in 7 years. Yes, I said. I'll see him. They brought Ezekiel into a small room with white walls and a table and 2 chairs and a window with frosted glass that let in light but no view. He came in wearing yesterday's clothes, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red in a way that told me he had not slept. He was so tall in that small room. He filled it the way Solomon used to fill a room, with his shoulders and his height and the particular physical presence of a man built large. But he sat down across from me and he made himself small. That was the thing I was not ready for. How small he made himself. How he folded his big hands on the table and looked at them and could not, for the first long minutes, look at me. I waited. Finally he looked up. And there he was. Under everything. Under the plan, the letter, the forged name, the silver sedan, the empty room, all of it, there was my son. The face I had watched change from infant to boy to man. Solomon's jaw. My mother's eyes. Ezekiel, who had learned to walk holding my 2 fingers because he didn't trust his own legs yet. Ezekiel, who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms until he was 11 years old and too proud to admit he was still afraid. Ezekiel, who had tried to steal everything I had left. "Mom," he said. His voice was stripped completely bare. Nothing performed about it. Just the raw sound of a man who had run out of strategies and was standing in the truth of what he'd done with nowhere left to hide. "I don't have any more words. I've used all my words. He stopped. Pressed his lips together hard. "I just needed to see your face." I looked at him for a long time before I spoke. "I need to ask you something," I said. "And I need you to answer me the way I raised you. Not the way the last few years made you. The way I raised you." He nodded. "Did any part of you, any small part, feel wrong about what you were doing?" The question sat between us. I watched it land on him. I watched him decide whether to answer honestly, and I watched honesty win, barely, by a very thin margin. "Every single day," he said. "Every day I felt it, Mom." "But Delilah," he stopped himself. Shook his head. "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not putting it on her. I'm a grown man. I knew. I wanted to stop struggling. I wanted to stop feeling like I was failing at everything. And somewhere in my head I told myself the house would have been mine eventually anyway. So what was the difference?" His voice broke. "But that's not true. I know it's not true. It was yours. Solomon built it for you. And I tried to take it." He put his face in his hands. I sat across from him, and I let him feel it. I did not reach over. I did not say it's okay, because it was not okay. I did not say I forgive you, because forgiveness is not a thing you hand over in a police interview room like a receipt. It is a long and private process that happens in your own heart on its own timeline. What I did was stay. I stayed in that chair, and I stayed present, and I let him feel the full weight of what he had done without rescuing him from it, because that was the truest motherly thing I knew how to do in that moment. After a while he lifted his face. "Is there anything left?" he asked. "Between us? Is there anything left?" I thought about that very carefully before I answered. "You are my son," I said finally. "That doesn't go away. It cannot go away because it is not a feeling. It is a fact. You came from my body and you carry your father's face, and those 2 things will be true until the last day of my life." I paused. "But Ezekiel, the kind of mother I was to you, the one who never said no hard enough, who was so afraid of losing you that she let you take and take and take without consequence, that mother is gone. She died the day I sat in Solomon's chair and heard you plan to sell this house over my head." I looked at him steadily. "What's left between us if you do the work, the real work, the kind that takes years and humility and a willingness to be uncomfortable? What's left could be something real. Something honest. Something your father would recognize." I stood up slowly. "But that work begins with what happens in this room today. With you telling the truth. All of it. Without protecting Delilah or protecting yourself. Just the truth." He straightened in his chair. Something shifted in him. I could see it, the way you see a foundation settle. Not fixed yet, but beginning. "I'll tell them everything," he said. "I know you will," I said. "Because whatever else you became, I know what I put in you at the beginning. And the beginning doesn't just disappear." I walked to the door. I stopped with my hand on the frame, and I looked back at him one last time. "Your father would be heartbroken," I said. "But he would also tell you that a man is not finished until he quits. So don't quit, Ezekiel. Whatever comes next, don't you quit." I walked out of that room, and I kept walking, and I did not stop until I was through the front doors and out into the open air. And then I stood on the pavement in the morning light, and I put my face up to the sky and I breathed. Just breathed. Ezekiel cooperated fully. He gave the police everything. The name Tobias Mensah-Brown, the details of the plan, the timeline, the contacts, every piece of it laid out in the thorough and painful detail of a man clearing a debt he knows he will spend a long time paying back. Delilah did not cooperate. That surprised no one. It took the better part of 3 months for the full legal process to work through itself. There were court dates and documents and phone calls from Naomi that I took at the kitchen table with my tea and my reading glasses, learning more about the law at 62 than I ever expected to know. Tobias Mensah-Brown was found to have known the documents were fraudulent and was charged accordingly. The buyer, a developer from out of state, was found to be an innocent party who had no knowledge of the fraud, and that particular thread was quietly unwound. The forged power of attorney was formally declared null and void. 14. Cypress Lane remained exactly where it had always been, in the name of Martha Abigail Osemensa, legal and whole and mine. Ezekiel was sentenced to 18 months with the possibility of early release based on his full cooperation and his clean prior record. Delilah received 3 years, the additional time a reflection of her role as the primary architect of the scheme and her absolute refusal to show one moment of genuine remorse throughout the entire proceeding. I was there the day the sentences were handed down. I sat in the courtroom in my good blue dress, the one I had made myself, every stitch, and I watched my son stand and receive the consequence of what he had chosen, and I held myself very still and very upright, and I did not cry. Not there. Not in that room. There is a time for tears and a time for witnessing, and that day I was a witness. I cried in the car afterward. Naomi drove and didn't say a word. She just handed me tissues from a small pack in her blazer pocket, which told me she had come prepared, which told me she understood, which told me that some people in this world know how to love you exactly right. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in early spring, I was in the backyard. Solomon's garden. The rose bushes had come back fierce and full the way they did every year regardless of what the winter did to them. The elm tree had new leaves, that particular tender green of things beginning again. The air smelled like wet soil, and somewhere down the street someone was mowing grass, and the whole world had that feeling of being quietly, persistently alive. I was in Solomon's chair. I had my sewing in my lap, a small altar cloth for Rebecca's church, white linen with gold thread along the border, a labor of love and patience that I had been working on for 3 weeks. My fingers still knew the work. They always would. The back door opened and Rebecca came out with 2 cups of tea, the way she had been doing on Saturday mornings for the past 4 months. She had started coming every week after everything settled, showing up at 9 with tea things and her old familiar laugh, and the particular gift of a friend who knew when to talk and when to simply sit beside you and be. She settled into the chair she had claimed as her own, Solomon's reading chair that I had brought out from the study, and handed me my cup and looked at the garden. "It's beautiful," she said. "Solomon planted it," I said. "I know," she said. "He had good taste." We sat in the comfortable silence of 60 years of friendship. The roses moved in the light breeze. A bird somewhere above us in the elm made a small persistent sound like it had something important to say. "Have you heard from him?" Rebecca asked. Gently. She always asked gently. "A letter last week," I said. "He's doing a program inside. Counseling. He says he's reading." I smiled a little. He said he found a Bible in the common room and started in Psalms because he remembered I always loved Psalms. Rebecca made a soft sound. "Solomon's boy," she said. "Solomon's boy," I agreed. We drank our tea. The morning moved around us the way mornings do when you are finally, genuinely at peace. Slowly, gently, with no urgency and no dread. I looked around at my garden. My house. My roses. My elm tree. The window Solomon had framed with his own hands. The cross still on the kitchen wall inside, straight as the day he hammered it in. 31 years of a man's love built into every beam and brick of this place, and 3 months of his son's worst choices had not moved a single piece of it. What Solomon built, nobody had been able to take. I threaded my needle with the gold thread. I found my place in the white linen. I began to sew. And somewhere in the quiet space between one stitch and the next, in the way that real peace always comes, not announced, not dramatic, just suddenly and completely present, I felt Solomon. Not a vision. Not a voice. Just the particular warmth of being known completely by someone, being loved without condition, being seen. That warmth that 7 years and all the grief in the world had not been able to take from me, because some things are stitched in deep enough that nothing reaches them. "I kept the house," I said quietly, to the garden, to the elm tree, to the air. The roses moved. I smiled and kept sewing. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Your presence here means more than you know. And remember, no matter what has been taken from you, no matter how deep the betrayal, what is truly yours, what has been built with love and held with faith, cannot be stolen. It can only be reclaimed. See you in the next story.